So there's ethical dilemmas that happen. This is a picture of the EO needle. It's spelled I-O needle. This is found on the island of Maui in Hawaii. And I really like it because it's a very, very steep mountain range, and it's very close to a city, and it's actually a state park. And what I really like is that it's wheelchair accessible. Now, you certainly can't climb the peaks, but the wheelchair accessibility can take people way back up into the valley. And so this is what I call the rock and the hard place. And sometimes it represents a vast distance that you just can't cross and you can't get there. And so as we look at the ethical dilemmas that are presented to us as clinicians, we're going to focus a little bit more deeply about beneficence, non-maleficence, patient autonomy, and justice, and understand the fifth pillar for dentistry is veracity. The text reading for this week is actually Albert Johnson, Mark Siegler, and William Winslade, the authors of the book Clinical Ethics, a practical approach to the ethical decisions in clinical medicine. And so I would like for you to read the introduction and also read under topic 1, medical indications, read about clinical judgment. In the 9th edition, it's pages 11 through 16. You may have an earlier edition with different pages. Clinical judgment and uncertainty is chapter 1.2, and in the 9th edition, it's pages 26 through 30. And then medical error, chapter 1.4, page 46. Pay attention to that in particular as we look and discuss a little bit more about medical error. When we focus on the 4 pillars of medical ethics, we look at case studies and they inform us. They help us make decisions before we actually encounter those clinical scenarios in our professional career and life. And so as a student, before you're actually a clinical person, you can form your foundation, your principles that you believe in, your moral values, and they can be based upon what your family has taught you. They can be based upon things that you have learned through your schooling. But ultimately, your values should not change over time. Medical ethics do not change over time. But the scope of practice can change. Technology can change. And as we try to apply clinical decisions, we're challenged to keep our knowledge current. So there are many reasons why, as we become clinicians, that we have to constantly be thinking about clinical ethics and about these 4 pillars of ethics. And I would encourage you to do that throughout your clinical careers. So when we talk about medical error, this is a rock and a hard place. The Institute of Medicine report in 1999 really shook up the world quite a bit, because this IOM report said 98,000 Americans die each year due to medical error. That really shocked a lot of folks. And so the push to understand evidence-based medicine really took off in the 90s and 2000s. And today, when we're in medical school, dental school, nursing school, we teach what is evidence-based, what is scientific, what do we know? And one of the ways that we teach students is we tell them to be able to search for evidence. And so it's very important to understand not everything on the internet is actually something you can rely upon. And we teach the pyramid of evidence-based methods. And so clinical practice guidelines maybe come from the AMA, might come from a well-recognized specialty. Those clinical practice guidelines are based upon a lot of clinical trials. And so when we do clinical trials and we find something and technology changes treatment, then other people begin to try to duplicate to see, do I get the same results? And then after a period of time, there are a lot of clinical trials that have been done, and somebody says, we need to really do a meta-analysis. We need to take all these things and put all the data together. And then you see a lot of people that have done meta-analysis on something, and they say, well, we need to do a systematic review. And that systematic review is going to get published in a peer-reviewed journal. And those are higher levels of evidence. And so we try to reach the highest levels of evidence. So if you're searching for medical evidence, a good place to look is called TRIP database. Another one is the Cochrane Review. These are very important ways that you can find what you need to find. A lot of people will look at PubMed. PubMed doesn't always have the highest levels of evidence. So you look for systematic reviews, you look for meta-analysis, you look for clinical practice guidelines, and you look for them in things that have peer review. And so trying to find out, do I have adequate information? If I don't, if I have inadequate information, I can make a wrong clinical decision. I can have mistaken judgment and actually can do defective treatment. So there are many times that things can be misdiagnosed, and that is what was reported in this Institute of Medicine report. And they specifically talked about misdiagnosed abdominal pain as gastritis, but it actually turned in to be something else. And so you could have cancer, you could have all kinds of defective treatment where maybe a person has an endotracheal tube, they have tube feeding, and instead of inserting it correctly into the esophagus, it gets inserted into the lung, and then you flood the lung with endotracheal medications or food, and people get pneumonias and they die. So we were very, very challenged as a health profession when this Institute of Medicine report came out in 1999. And I do believe that we've really improved what we're requiring students to do, to learn, to follow the best evidence. But it really gets back to your ethics. So what was the ethical principle? The ethical principle is, have I kept up? Have I actually been able to stay current in my knowledge? Do I really take the time to research and find out how to treat for a particular patient and apply the best evidence? Or am I still doing the same thing I've always done? And so there are many things that we do in order to prevent maleficence. So we don't want to create something bad. We want non-maleficence. We want to do no harm. And so it was really important for us in this, when we looked at this Institute of Medicine report, it was very important for people to understand that we have to find the best evidence, and we have to really increase our knowledge and stay within our scope of. So could we do better? What's our ethical dilemma? Well, when we have people that are vulnerable and they don't have a lot of resources, we kind of rationalize the impact of poor care. We kind of look at it and say, well, you know, they might not live that long. Or we look at things and say, well, as a health team, we have to complete procedures. Remember the fixer or server from last week? Health teams try to complete procedures because that's how we get reimbursed. That's how we get paid. And so our need to be paid might not be in line with what the patient needs as far as treatment. Vulnerable people require more time for procedure. Prevention improves outcomes, and in-home health promotion works. So we have to look at this and say, where am I going to fall in this rock and hard place? What are my ethical decisions? If you answer those based upon your Christian values, and later you become evidence-based in your approach, you will already know what your decisions are going to be. But then we also know that if we're not reimbursed for what we do, sometimes we just say, well, we're just not going to do anything. And as a society, it's very evident that many people that could benefit from prevention, that have the greatest health disparity, are the people who get the least care. And so that is an ethical dilemma for us as a society. So the ethical principles are justice. Are we really thinking about what is fair and what is right for all? Do we provide care only to those people who could pay for it? And if people can't pay for it, are we supposed to provide care as health professionals and not be reimbursed? That's not a good option either. So if you give all your care away, you won't be doing it for very long. So there's nothing wrong with being paid for what you do. But we need as health professionals to be advocates to make sure that we have value as well as volume. So we want to be able to provide health care and prevent problems as well as treat problems. Mentors will shape our ethics. Dr. Perlman, I became acquainted with him in the early 90s through Special Olympics, and he's been a mentor. He was a pediatric dentist from Boston. He founded Special Smiles, which is affiliated with Special Olympic events. And he used to call me and talk to me, and he didn't know me other than just he knew my name, and he knew that I was the director for developmental disabilities in Arkansas. And he really wanted to help me to see how I could make a difference as a dentist, helping people with disabilities. So my role was not dental. I was over all of the care the individuals received. I was over the Title V program, Children's Medical Services. I was over the Early Intervention program. And so we need those mentors to challenge our thinking. It actually helps shape our ethical decisions. I had two mentors at Houston Baptist. Dr. Joyce Fan was my chemistry professor, and she used to say, organic is easy. And I want you to know she was an encourager. She was also known for having very difficult tests. You really had to study. You really had to work hard to do well in her class. But she really wanted you to have she wanted you to have academic excellence. She also really pushed hard for people to go to medical school and dental school, and I'm very appreciative of her recommendation for me to go to dental school. The other person that was a mentor for me at Houston Baptist was Dr. Troy Womack. Very, very kind man. I didn't deserve the attention that he gave me, but he actually found affinity for me, found out that I had gone to Texarkana College where he had been first, and spent a lot of time trying to encourage me. And as a 20-year-old, I needed that, and it was very, very helpful. I came from a small town in East Texas, and coming to Houston was a big deal. And I have to thank Dr. Fan and Dr. Womack. I would encourage you to find your mentors. Find people that are going to influence you and impact. Find people who are going to impact your decisions. When I got to dental school, Dr. Konisberg was a mentor to me. He's the reason that I wanted to become a special needs dentist. In the 1970s, he started the Goodwill Clinic where I got the privilege of working. And it was my exposure to people with disabilities that actually shaped my career. And he was the kind of person that was determined to help people. He was in charge of community dentistry at the University of Texas School of Dentistry in Houston. So the last person that impacted me was a patient of mine, Paula. I met Paula as a child out in Rosenberg. We went to church, in the same church. And later, when I was in dental school, I went out to a facility, and there she was. And I was shocked. I didn't know what had happened to Paula. Her dad had passed away, and her mom had to work, and she couldn't stay at home. And so she was put into a facility. And it was the first time I looked at a patient with disability in different eyes and recognized them and saw them for the person that they were. She was absolutely the sweetest and kindest person. She passed away in 1995 and was a very, very influential person in my development as a dental student. So what is the policy in the United States? It's that people with disabilities should have full and normal opportunity, just like people without disability. That's the federal law. That doesn't mean that it always happens. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to get involved as a volunteer in Special Olympics. They take everybody. I want to thank some of the students at Houston Christian that have actually been coming to some events. They've made a big difference in the lives of people with disability, and I think Special Olympics impacts them. So we call this program that Mosaic. We connect students to community service. And so we really encourage more people to participate. Special Olympics has Fun Fitness, Healthy Hearing, Health Promotion, Special Smiles, which is dental, Strong Minds, and MedFast. So regardless of what aspect of healthcare you're in, there's a place for you to volunteer. And the last thing I want to share is that people with disability, they have health disparities. They're worldwide. Problem solving is really difficult for families as people age, and access to care as people become adults, becomes more difficult to find. And so I want you to be asking yourself, what are the ethical principles that apply to people with disabilities as their health changes over their lifespan? And I thank you again, and encourage you to do the readings and to do the assignments for this week. Thank you.